"You can't keep being so selfish," Juliet had said to me just 3 days before the ceremony. "Ethan and I have sacrificed so much for this marriage. The least you can do is help us with housing." Her words no longer even wore the mask of fake concern. It was a direct demand disguised as a family favor. That night, I had made a decision that would change everything. I called Carlos, my financial advisor, and the only man I had completely trusted since my husband Robert's death. "Carlos, I need you to prepare some documents. It's possible I'll very soon have to reveal information I've kept secret for years." His voice had become serious immediately. "Mrs. Hughes, are you sure this is the right time?" He had warned me with the wisdom of someone who had handled my affairs for more than a decade. "Once this information is public, you can't take it back. The consequences could be devastating for family relationships." But I had already made up my mind. The family I had tried to protect with my silence had chosen to betray me. And now, sitting in my car in the ballroom parking lot, waiting for Carlos to arrive with the documents that would change everything, I realized the moment of truth had come. 25 more minutes, and Juliet, Ethan, and all those guests who had looked at me with pity would discover who Aurora Hughes really was. 25 more minutes, and their perfect worlds built on lies and greed would crumble like sandcastles. The night breeze rustled the tree leaves around the parking lot, creating dancing shadows under the lights. It was strangely poetic that on such a beautiful night, so many illusions were about to die forever. 20 minutes had passed since my call to Carlos, and every second felt like an eternity. From my car, I could see the golden lights of the ballroom, hear the cheerful music and laughter spilling out of the open windows. It was surreal to think that in just a few minutes, that celebration would turn into a nightmare for the main players. I closed my eyes and let the most painful memories of the last few months flood my mind. I needed to remember exactly why I had reached this point of no return. The biggest humiliation had happened just 2 weeks before the wedding, during what Juliet had called an important family meeting. She had arrived at my apartment, accompanied not only by Ethan, but also by her parents, a perfectly planned ambush. "Aurora, we want to talk to you about your future," Juliet's mother, an haughty woman who looked at me as if I were a bothersome insect, had begun. "We believe it's time for you to make responsible decisions about your life," continued Juliet's father, a burly man who had surveyed my apartment with the eyes of an appraiser evaluating a property. "At your age, living alone in such a big place is not only unnecessary, but dangerous. What if you have a medical emergency and no one finds out for days?" Their words were rehearsed, too perfect to be spontaneous. Ethan had remained silent throughout the conversation, nodding occasionally like a well-trained puppet. Seeing him there, sitting next to a family that treated me like an obstacle, was like watching the son I had raised die before my eyes. "Mom," he finally said, in a voice I no longer recognized. "They're right. Juliet and I have been talking, and we think it would be better for everyone if you moved to a place more appropriate for your age." "Appropriate for my age?" I repeated, feeling the anger begin to boil inside me. "And who gets to decide what's appropriate for me? You?" Juliet's mother exchanged a knowing look with her husband, as if my words confirmed something they had already discussed. "Aurora, we understand this can be difficult to accept, but you must think about what's best for Ethan and Juliet." "What's best for them?" I murmured, beginning to understand the true dimension of the conspiracy that had been woven behind my back. "And I suppose my apartment would be perfect for them to start their married life, right?" The awkward silence that followed my question was all the answer I needed. They had planned every detail of this conversation, every argument, every psychological pressure. Juliet took control at that moment, deploying her full arsenal of emotional manipulation. "Aurora, it's not just about the apartment, it's about your well-being. We've been doing research, and we found a wonderful residence for people your age. It has 24-hour medical services, social activities, prepared meals. You could make friends with people who understand what you're going through." Her fake smile made me nauseous. What I'm going through? I asked, feigning confusion. And what exactly do you think I'm going through, Juliet? She looked at Ethan for support before answering. Well, loneliness, financial uncertainty, the fear of not being able to take care of yourself. It's normal at your age, Aurora. You don't have to be ashamed of needing help. The audacity of this 28-year-old woman telling me what was normal at my age left me speechless for a moment. But then I saw something in her eyes that chilled me. The absolute certainty that she had a right to my life, my home, my decisions. To her, I was no longer a person with autonomy, but an obstacle to be removed with as little resistance as possible. We've run the numbers, Juliet's father continued, pulling out a folder they had clearly prepared in advance. The cost of the residence would be approximately $2,500 a month. With the sale of your apartment, you'd have enough money to cover it for many years, and there would still be some left over to help Ethan and Juliet with their initial marriage expenses. There it was, the naked, raw truth. It wasn't about my well-being or my safety. It was about money. It was about converting my home into cash to finance their unsustainable lifestyle. And if I refuse? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Aurora, Ethan said, his voice sounding rehearsed. We hope it won't be necessary to take more drastic measures, but if your mental health deteriorates to the point that you can't make rational decisions. The implicit threat was crystal clear. If I didn't cooperate voluntarily, they would seek legal ways to declare me incompetent. They had done their research, they had planned, they had prepared the ground to take everything I owned by force if necessary. The son I had raised with so much love was sitting right there, allowing strangers to threaten his own mother. That night, after they left with my firm refusal, I cried for the first time in years. Not out of sadness, but for the definitive death of the illusions I had held about my family. I had called Carlos immediately. I need you to investigate something urgently, I had told him through tears. I want to know exactly what the real financial situation is for my son and his fiancée. Everything. Debts, income, liabilities, everything. The results of that investigation had been devastating. Ethan earned $45,000 annually as a sales manager, but had debts of more than $80,000 on credit cards. Juliet worked part-time as an image consultant, making maybe $4,000 a year, but spent as if she had an executive salary. Together, they owed more than $120,000, not counting the loans they had taken out for the wedding. The apartment they rented for $2,000 a month was 3 months behind on payments. The cars they drove were financed with payments that took up 60% of their combined income. Their main credit card was maxed out, and they had started using cash advances to pay other debts. They were in a financial freefall, and my apartment represented their only hope of salvation. But there was something else in Carlos's report that had completely broken my heart. For the past 6 months, Ethan had been regularly calling banks and insurance companies, asking about loans against his elderly mother's property. He had been asking about legal procedures to obtain financial power of attorney over senior citizens. My own son had been planning my systematic dispossession for months. The most painful information had come at the end of the report. According to a private investigator Carlos had hired, Juliet had been telling her friends that she had sacrificed herself by getting engaged to an older, less attractive man because his mother had valuable properties and no competitive heirs. To her, marrying Ethan wasn't love. It was a strategic investment in my estate. That revelation had been the final straw. For weeks, I had considered simply revealing my true financial situation to them, thinking that maybe the shock would make them reconsider their behavior. But after reading that report, I understood that it wasn't about money or desperation. It was about a pure, calculated greed that had corrupted my son until he was unrecognizable. The days leading up to the wedding had been torture. Every phone call from Ethan was a new pressure to reconsider my position. Every visit from Juliet included poisonous comments about my stubbornness and selfishness. They had started to treat me as if I were already a senile old woman whose opinions didn't matter. The night before the wedding, Ethan had made his last attempt. "Mom, tomorrow is the most important day of my life. Please don't ruin it by being difficult. Juliet just wants what's best for all of us." His words had been the final confirmation that I had lost my son forever. The man who was getting married the next day was no longer the boy I had raised with so much love and sacrifice. And now, sitting in my car waiting for Carlos, I realized that everything had led to this inevitable moment. It wasn't about revenge or cruelty, it was about justice. It was about showing them the consequences of their actions. It was about teaching them that some lines should never have been crossed. 15 more minutes, and everything would change forever. My hands trembled as I dialed the number for Joseph, my neighbor from the apartment next door, a 70-year-old man who had been a silent witness to all the tense visits of the last few months. "Joseph, it's Aurora. I need to ask you for a very important favor," I said, my voice shaking. "Could you go to my apartment and bring me the brown folder from the second drawer of my desk? Yes, right now. It's urgent." Joseph had been like a brother to me since Robert passed away, and I knew I could trust him without him asking questions. While I waited, I remembered the conversation I had with Joseph just a week earlier. He had witnessed from his balcony when Juliet arrived with a real estate appraiser without notifying me. "Aurora, that girl brought a man with a briefcase who was measuring your apartment from the outside," he had told me with obvious concern in his voice. "When they saw me, they left quickly. I don't like what's happening at all." Joseph had been the first to notice the subtle changes in Ethan's